Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Richard Bate, IOSH Vice President, and I'm delighted to join you for today's webinar. Personally, I find the subject of AI fascinating and, being honest, a little bit frightening, probably in equal measure. This is probably likely due to my lack of knowledge and understanding of AI, but I'm sure our world-leading panel will answer many of mine and your questions today. So a little bit about IOSH. We're the largest global chartered body for health and safety professionals, health, safety and wellbeing professionals in the world. Currently running at about 52,000 members in 130 countries. But there are many more things that IOSH does that perhaps you're not aware of. The Institution of Occupational Health and Safety is I'd say, the largest professional body for OSH professionals in the world, but we have great links throughout the world with other organizations. We qualify new entrants into our profession. We have our own amazing training academy, and more than 1.5 million people globally have taken our Managing Safely and Working Safely courses. That's an incredible number and a great success for IOSH. But IOSH exists as a charity for public good. And as part of that, obviously the key part of that is protecting workers through occupational safety and health work practices. But importantly, alongside our membership activities, we're a commercial organization, and those commercial activities, they're not for profit. We reinvest our revenue into developing and promoting the profession globally. So let's look at our vision, our current strategy, a safe and healthy world of work for all. So all of our work pursues our long-standing vision of a safe and healthy world of work for everyone, and that's wherever they are in the world. It's not just UK focused. In June 2022, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, recognized a safe and healthy working environment as a fundamental principle and right for everyone at work. Now, at IOSH, we advocate ways to make this vision a reality. So let's look at the challenges and opportunities our changing world of work brings. So clearly, work is a huge part of all of our lives, but for how many people is work actually safe, healthy, fulfilling, and reassuring? Even the definition of workplace has changed. It's no longer restricted to the confines of a single building or a single location. The tasks workers do and how and where we carry them out are transforming constantly and rapidly. And things are rapidly changing in many other areas in the workplace and the future of work, where roles, industries, working patterns even are already changing in the face of our climate emergency. So we face the challenges and opportunities presented by an aging workforce, often with 4 generations working simultaneously in a workplace. Roles and industries and working patterns are already changing in the face of our climate emergency. As part of IOSH's response to better understanding of these challenges and opportunities that face us ahead for the future of work, the future of the OSH profession, and therefore the role of bodies such as IOSH, we commissioned a global consultancy, Arup, to reflect on these horizons, future scanning what comes next. So towards a safe and healthy future at work. Now, this is a fantastic report. The result of the work that we've done with Arup as IOSH, it's caused us to reflect internally and look at current and future changes created by new technologies, demographic shifts, and external forces such as climate change. And our report poses a fundamental question. Are we living through a time of rapid evolution, or is it a more fundamental revolution? So if you can, either on the IOSH website, or if you're really quick, you can scan the QR code. I really would recommend that you have a look at this report. And it contains a lot of what ifs. We're asking questions about how things might develop. We want to create conversations and connections with a wider audience to get their views and understand what's they're real concerns now. And importantly, what's coming next? What's around the corner? So for this webinar, please keep in mind that the what ifs. What if using new technologies to improve worker protection creates other health and safety and well-being risks? What if machines such as robots, drones, can be used in some of the more hazardous environments, such as working at height, confined spaces? What if we have exoskeletons that enable us as humans to carry out tasks previously beyond our abilities? And what if digitization of administrative and even creative tasks, especially using generative artificial intelligence, could replace even more jobs? Now, there's one recent estimate that suggests that up to 80% of tasks in certain jobs could be automated. So technology and digitization. This can throw up physical risks for humans, which perhaps I hadn't considered well until I listened to a session a few months ago. And what does it mean for us working alongside these machines as humans? So as safety and health professionals, we need to be at the table to discuss digital and technological interventions so that we can advocate for safety in designer and work-centered approaches. So we need to be at the table. We need to be involved in the discussions. You guys joining the session today is part of that. So the role of AI in managing workforces. With all of this in mind, this webinar is delving into AI in the workplace and business. But what does it mean to those who are being managed by AI, and what do those risks, what do they look like? So I've got a fantastic panel joining me today with years and knowledge of expertise behind them. I'm going to introduce the panelists in order. But firstly, I'm just going to give you a really quick introduction to Tess, Prakash, and Angelo. So Tess Buckley, Program Manager in Digital Ethics and AI Safety at TechUK. Prakash Senghani, CEO and co-founder of the Navatech Group, and Angelo Cianfrocco, HSE Technology Manager at Fluor Corporation. So I'm going to stop talking at this point, and I'm going to hand over to Prakash, who will introduce himself in more detail and take you through his section of the session.
Thank you, Richard. And it's a great pleasure to be on this panel and presenting on this webinar. So I'm Prakash Senghani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Navatech, and we are specialized in creating AI tools that help frontline workers manage safety. So we're using AI in a really practical way to make it more accessible and to open up what we do in health and safety to more and more people. But for today's presentation, and it's a really short one, I'm just going to go through some practical examples of how AI is being used to manage the workforce. But before I do that, I just want to touch on a point that Richard made in terms of some of the fear mongering that exists around AI, and some of it, I suppose, is well placed, but most of it is not. And Richard mentioned that that AI can be a little bit scary. There's lots of perception around AI, and one of the biggest ones is that it's going to take all of our jobs, and there's going to be mass redundancies, and that AI is essentially going to take over, and then humans are not going to be left with anything to do. The problem with this outlook is that people don't really understand how AI works if they believe that that's the case, because in most use cases where AI is being used, there's still human required. So there's this concept of human in the loop, either to validate what the AI is outputting or to do something and action the output of the different AIs. The reality of this is very, very different. So recent studies are showing actually that AI won't lead to a world without work. A lot of studies are showing that AI will actually make what we do a lot more efficient. And there's also this perception of what AI is in terms of it's either just ChatGPT or it's AI robots that are going to take over certain manual tasks, which is, I think, a long, long way away still. But even then, it's going to be a case where these this technology and these technologies actually augment what we do as humans. And so what I really think is that the only way to make sure that AI doesn't take your job is to use AI to help you do your job better, right? If we're going to be afraid of it, and if we're going to constantly bury our head in the sand, and then there's a big chance that it might end up taking our jobs. But if we embrace it and start looking at how we can help us do our jobs better, or help use AI to help our jobs do better, be better at our jobs, then I think we're going to be in a much better place. Now I'm going to talk to you about 3 different types of AI and the practical applications of those when it comes to managing the safety of the workforce. So the first one is AI analytics. So we're seeing a lot of AI being utilized to absorb the massive amount of data that we create. So we create data in all sorts of different ways. It's coming from us accessing the internet, posting things on social media, doing web searches, every time we use our mobile phones. Then there's also data coming from the plethora of sensors that are being installed in the world around us. And sensors include things like cameras, but they also include things like weather, the sensors inside our phones, inside our watches, inside the computers and ATMs and things like that all around us. And then the AI is capturing all of this information, which is probably impossible for a human to analyze. But the AI is able to analyze that information and create actionable insights for us to be able to make decisions based upon. We're also able to use that to predict what might happen in the future, to help us to avoid things and again, help us to make these decisions in a more effective way. Another type of AI is something called vision AI. And this is where they're using pictures and AI is ingesting these pictures and being able to analyze and see what's in those pictures, interpret what's in the pictures, and then again, give you insights that you can then use to make decisions. Now, there are some ethics to be considered in here, and I think Tess will talk about those in terms of AI starts becoming a tool to police and monitor people in terms of like a bit of Big Brother. And the stuff on the left-hand side is a little bit like that, where AI is sometimes being abused and used to monitor people and there has some negative connotations. But there's also positives of utilizing the same technology. The example on the right-hand side is using the AI to look at the ergonomics of how someone does their job. And is that causing them to have potential long-term issues, which you can't see at the moment. And so therefore, maybe you might suggest that that person does a rotation in their piece of work and goes and does something else because it's likely that doing the same repetitive task over and over again might cause them some type of injury, as an example. And then the third type of AI is I want to talk about, which is practically being used, is conversational AI. And this is an area that we at Navatech are really specializing in. So we're using conversational AI to break down the barriers between the workforce and safety information. Chat interfaces are one of the most popular ways that humans want to interact with. If you think about how often you use a chat interface on your day-to-day lives, WhatsApp, iMessenger, Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, all of these applications are hugely popular because of their chat interfaces, makes it really, really easy to interact with other people. So we're tapping into that same psychology and using that to help us interact with humans with safety information. And there's 2 ways. One is capturing information from those so that we can analyze the data and get a better understanding of how safety is being implemented. And the other is disseminating safety information to people at the right time. So it's about getting the right content to the right people at the right time. And conversational AI allows us to do that in multiple different modalities, various different languages, pictures, voice, text. And so this is, I hope, just a real quick flavor of the different types of AI and why we perhaps shouldn't be as scared of it as the media makes out. With that, I'm going to hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Prakash. That's, yeah, there are so many questions I have there, but I'm sure we'll come back to those questions. And I can see questions are already popping up in the chat. So now I'm going to hand over to Angelo to introduce himself and talk to you for about 5 minutes on his work in this sector.
Yep, great. Appreciate everyone having me today. I'm happy to be here. So quick background on myself. So my name is Angelo Cianfrocco. I'm based in the U.S. I work for Fluor Corporation, which is a global engineering, procurement, and construction organization. I was brought onto Fluor to help with the health, safety, and environmental HSE technology roadmap. So I've worked in the safety space for over a decade. I've worked on a frontline kind of manager role. I've worked in corporate roles, and then I also worked as a product manager for a technology vendor in the safety space. So I've always kind of been at the intersection of technology and kind of like traditional HSE work. And so, this new age that we're heading into is really interesting to me, and happy to talk a bit about what we're doing at Fluor. So the first thing, my view kind of on AI is the first and foremost is it's not a golden ticket. And Prakash kind of alluded to this and some of the points I'm going to make as well. But, it's not, you flip the switch on AI and some kind of technology and you're good to go and you never have to worry about anything ever again, right? It's a tool just like anything else. And the tool has to be matched to the right use case and the right task in order for it to be effective for your organization, right? And the third thing is that, I don't know if AI, and Prakash again kind of mentioned this, and I didn't see his slide deck before, I promise. It just happened that we had a lot of crossover. But I think AI can be used to augment the management of workers, but not something that's going to, again, automate the management of workers. And I think that's a really important distinction, when it comes to the ethics and keeping the human in the loop and the concerns people have about getting replaced in the workplace. So a couple areas where I feel like, we're starting to have some success using AI to keep workers safe is the first thing is, AI is very good at detecting patterns that humans may not be able to detect on their own. And so, we're having some success in AI helping us detect the undetectable. And it's two specific examples I have around that is one is we're using a heat stress monitoring device that kind of sits on the employee's arms. You could, it's basically like a big Fitbit. It goes on their bicep and it tracks core body temperatures for those employees. And so we're getting real-time feedback from those edge devices, and the devices have machine learning algorithms that run on the device to help kind of estimate the employee's core body temperature. And so we're giving the employees real-time feedback on things that they may not be able to see in themselves to help get ahead of potential heat stress events. So if their body temperature gets to a certain threshold, the device alarms and it helps automate the work rest schedule for that employee. The second thing is analyzing kind of form data. So, in HSE, a lot of the information we're gathering from the field is in forms. Those forms have free text fields. And historically, it's been really difficult to get any kind of insight out of those free text fields. But that's really where a lot of the context of what's being reported lies, is in that free text discussion. And so with AI, we've been able to kind of glean more insights and more trends and information out of those previously, unanalyzable fields. And so that's been really helpful for us to detect the things that we can't detect in that information. Along the same lines as individualizing safety, I think one of the things, again, going back to the heat stress monitoring, just because it's top of mind lately, is we're really able to individualize safety for the employees out in the field. And what I mean by that is, we have heat stress programs that we put in place on different projects. And, we're going to take work rest at this time, we're going to have this shade, this work schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of a blanket policy for all, the workers on the site and everyone on the site. But with the devices that we're using, we can individualize work rest schedules for each employee based on the real-time feedback that they're getting for themselves, right? So instead of having a blanket policy, now we can individualize it for each individual person out on the site. Another area where I see this potentially being fruitful, and we're not doing this today, but just something that I even tested out on myself last week is if you take a picture of your workstation, put it into ChatGPT. Don't put anything sensitive in there, obviously, if you're using the public model. But it'll give you feedback to say, okay, there's cords over here, there's this thing next to the workstation. So you can kind of individualize the work hazards that you're seeing in your individual work areas based on your interaction with the AI tool. So where do I see risks in human behavior? So I took this quote, I think it's from Spider-Man, actually. My son's obsessed with Spider-Man right now. So with great power comes great responsibility. So, when we have something out in the field that's looked at as monitoring or controlling, workers and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, it's easy for workers to feel like there's distrust, there may be resistance, there's fear, to what we're putting in place. And ultimately, I think this can really deteriorate that safety culture that we're all trying to build, right? We're all desperate to build that safety culture. And if we do this in the wrong way, that distrust, that resistance, that fear can really undermine that safety culture. I think what it comes down to is really focusing on communication and transparency with these new tools, right? It's something new, something that people don't understand. So it can't just be about what this tool is. It has to be, why are we using it? How does it work? How is it going to help me? What type of information is collected? And the more transparency we give workers, I think the more success we'll see. So, if you're going to start your journey using AI tools, I think the first thing to know is, and we've felt this, is there's a lot of pressure, right? From upper management, from executives. It's a hot topic right now. There's a lot of pressure to adopt AI and innovative tech into HSE and into your processes. I think the first thing is you really want to make sure that you're actually solving a real problem, right? You don't want to implement technology just for technology, because it's not going to work. And it's going to probably have negative effects on your culture, right? The second thing is, if you do identify problems, really interrogate your process and say, before we jump into fixing this problem with AI or with technology, is this something that we can fix with more traditional means, right? Is there a simpler fix? Is there a process fix? Is there a cultural fix that's going to help us move down the road and we don't need to implement technology? The third thing is you want to start small. So if you find out that you do need some kind of technology, right, focus on augmenting rather than automating a process, right? Start with something small, something simple, something that's already understood, right? Don't jump right to, okay, we're going to put AI on all the cameras around the facility and track everyone's every movement, right? Let's start smaller and let's build the trust, and let's get to that point if we need to in the future. The fourth thing I have on there, and this is going to be something I talk about more, later on in the conversation as well, is communication, right? So we need to define the mission and vision and the framing for why we're using these technologies out in the field. And the last thing is to gather feedback and input from workers. So I think it's really important as we use these, innovative technologies, things that people aren't really familiar with, is we need to build the business case internally, not only with the management team, but also with the workers, to say, we use these heat stress monitors on this project. Here's the feedback we got from employees. Here's why they thought it really helped them. Here's why we really think it can help you, right? Get some better understanding. If you get better understanding, you get better adoption, and you get a better process to make improvements to. So that is what I got for now, and we'll talk again soon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Again, so many questions, and I can see there are some great questions already coming up in the Q&A. I'm going to hand over to Tess now, and Tess can introduce herself and take us through her slides.
Perfect. Really great to hear the other presentations and just come to know that we are actually very much on the same page. I think having that kind of technical understanding and then how it's actually working in the real world is so important to then reflect on the ethical concerns and potential challenges in integration. For context, I have a postgraduate in philosophy and artificial intelligence that was focused on ableism in biotechnologies. And I used to work with a data set on corporate digital responsibility before developing a specialized model. And now I work at TechUK, which is the trade association of the tech sector. Think like 1,000 tech companies in our membership, and I lead our work on digital ethics and AI safety, which looks a lot like, okay, how can we take ethical principles and put them into practice through assurance mechanisms and standards? So without further ado, here's a bit of a brief presentation. I'm going to start by just setting the scene. What is digital ethics? Let's make sure that we're really on the same page here. IOSH provided 2 key questions for me, which I really appreciate. We'll be navigating those together. And then I'll point to or signpost key tools for trustworthy AI in practice that you might want to refer to as you're kind of maturing in the space and integrating AI. And then finally, the business case for ethics and how you might take that next step. Setting the scene. So this presentation is not about the Terminator. It's not about the Matrix. As pointed out by Prakash, I think we have a lot of fear-mongering in the news and films that don't necessarily inform the right perception of AI and understanding of it. I come from a philosophy background. I think that study is so important, but often we'll see ethical principles that lack substance or justified or evidence action. And so this is going to be a very operational focus today. I'm not going to supply a laundry list for you of the potential risks. Instead, I'm going to be giving you practical tools as well as just pointing to things that are already happening in industry. So digital ethics kind of talks about what we've been doing with humans for years in philosophy. It's what is right and wrong, what is moral and immoral, just and unjust, and how can we get together kind of a code of conduct to guide our actions in the development and then also use of emerging technologies. And for further references from the Alan Turing Institute in 2019. 2 shared questions was my perspective on the psychological impact on workers being managed by AI or potential impact, and then also other ethical considerations that we should be considering as we're hopeful to adopt these into our workforce. So the key kind of concerns that we're seeing currently is increased stress and anxiety, loss of autonomy and job satisfaction, and this kind of depersonalization or reduced social connection. And a few ways that we can tackle this together, or you can tackle it with your workforce. For increased stress and anxiety, communicated by my other incredible panelists, is transparency in the decision-making process. So all too often we're seeing outputs being generated, but then not being justified and worked through with a manager. We're going to have to see a lot of regular human feedback alongside generative AI insights, and be sure to kind of review potential performance targets. I think, you know, sometimes these systems, they're brilliant, but they don't consider the fact that we need to take washroom breaks. Or we might have differently abled folk that need to check their blood pressure every now and then. So being sure to make sure it's a part of your decision-making. For loss of autonomy and job satisfaction, being sure that your workers are involved, that there are feedback mechanisms, areas for redress, and that the things that they're being recognized and rewarded for are not just based on AI metrics. Again, this complementary element, augmenting rather than replacing. And then the kind of depersonalization, we want to be sure that humans are delivering the news. So when we're involving AI in performance reviews, it's always nice to have a manager put their hand on your shoulder and talk you through choices, rather than it getting just delivered straight to your desk through an automated system. And kind of having these peer-to-peer collaborations. We're seeing some faculties in improving or encouraging like AI-free zones where people that might struggle with kind of a social anxiety or surveillance anxiety can take a break. So ethical considerations. This is like not a one-stop shop. Ethics is so gray and is very socially and culturally dependent, but this was flagged by Angelo. The question you should start with is, should we actually integrate? Like, what is the problem we're seeing? And is AI the right thing, the right solution? I think there's a lot of hype right now. And so we're seeing people rush to implement, but they don't actually know what they're using it for. So just because you could doesn't mean you should. Then focus on feedback, communicating with your employees. You know, you could implement the best technology in the world, but if they don't trust it, they won't be willing to take it on and it won't be used in the way you hope. So providing feedback mechanisms and kind of iterative engagement will be so important. This was mentioned by Prakash, is keeping humans in the loop. So whether it's about scheduling or letting someone go, there should always be someone who's prompting the system and then applying it. Being sure to review what you're doing and assess, do we need to reskill rather than just drop a technology on a desk? And is it actually working in the way we intended? H-centric stands for human-centric, so prioritize your people. Is it supporting them? And if not, how can we support their upskilling or maybe shift what we're doing? Just due to time, I'm going to be conscious here and whip through the last couple of slides. very much a signposting exercise. And my understanding is you'll be able to access these in the aftermath. So tools for trustworthy AI means AI assurance and standards. So we see regulation and it's good, but it's a lot about like, what is responsible AI rather than how do we do responsible AI? And that's where assurance and standards really come into play. So assurance is a form of accountancy. This can be seen in bias audits, risk management frameworks, and standards is kind of like an agreed upon process. The AI assurance ecosystem itself is actually also a bit of an economic activity, cybersecurity being an example of a mature assurance ecosystem. Here we have for your consideration, if you're looking to integrate AI, you should also be looking to integrate the list you see on the screen here. So starting with your AI ethics principles. Let's get on the same page. You have the OECD AI ethics principles, which are a go-to in my space with responsible AI practitioners. If you're based in the UK, we have the white paper principles approach. There are 5 key ones, and they're actually released by the government. It's public there. I would say do not just copy and paste these 2 suggested documents. Be sure to adjust it to your company values and also your social and cultural context. And that's where having an ethicist on board is really helpful. AI assurance, DCIT in the UK has a specific unit called the Responsible Technology Adoption Unit that leads this work. So if you're like, Tess, I've never heard of assurance, what is this? You can read, it's called the Introduction to AI Assurance, publicly available. TechUK actually worked with Responsible Tech Adoption Unit on something called the Portfolio of Assurance Techniques. And you can see these assurance techniques in practice. So they're kind of use cases. Standards, you got the British Standards Institute, Alan Turing Hub. I would point to ISO 42001, and then the US, the NIST Risk Management Framework as well. Business cases, very important here, because I know that ethics is, yes, the right thing to do, but it actually has a lot of benefit to your business. Investor priorities. I used to work with investors that wanted to understand their portfolio risks, and they were doing so by evaluating corporate digital responsibility. So if you want to attract investment, this is a really important thing to take into consideration. You want to avoid scandal and support credibility, because if you don't, you're going to build or destroy stakeholder value. Demonstrate compliance with the EU AI Act coming in right next door. And this was also touched on by Angelo, is like, we have a total erosion of public trust, and that really impacts adoption. So you want to be taking these actions to justify trust in your consumer. And please catch up with your competitors. Industry is already doing this. Action steps you could take tomorrow. I won't list them, but I think all too often we don't have a clear idea of who is responsible for responsible AI. So be sure to create clear lines of responsibility. And perhaps if just your workers are even using generative AI, chatbots, creating a guidelines of use and integrating into your already existing IT policy could prove useful. So thank you so much for your ears. I'm really looking forward to upcoming panel discussion. Thanks, Richard.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Tess. I'm going to give Tess a little bit of a breather. She's only just finished. Prakash, my friend, I've got a question for you, which I think Angelo will want to respond to as well. So can algorithmic management reduce the trust between employees and employers? I think this has come up in the chat quite a few times as well.
Yeah, look, if we're not careful, like with any tool, we can degrade the trust that it takes years to build, and it's really, really easy to lose. And there's multiple different ways I think we can erode that trust. If the responses coming from the AI are incorrect, or are implausible, or not believable in any way, you'll start losing trust in the tool. But also, and I think Tess could probably speak to some of this, is if we've got biases in the data and it's constantly giving us responses that are skewed to one side, as an example, all of these things can help us lose trust. But also, the tool itself can help us develop trust as well. And this is something that we're really, really keen to do. So whenever we give a response from our AI, we give you the source and the page number from where that source came from, right? And so that, we hope, is helping to build trust in the answer. So if you've got any doubt, you can go and look at the document yourself and have a look at it. But also, if you wanted to find out more about the topic, if you felt that the answer wasn't verbose enough, you can go and look and do your own research. So I think it's kind of a double-sided or double-edged sword.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Angelo, do you want to come back on that, please?
Yeah, just real quick. I think, I mean, I agree with everything Prakash just said. I think, anytime you are going to have more eyes and ears out in the field, which is, I think, how a lot of workers kind of perceive AI. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about, right? There's a lot of different use cases, Richard, as you kind of alluded to in the beginning of the session. But, when you have eyes and ears out in the field, people get a feeling of, just like any of us do when we, you have your Amazon Home, I forget what it's called, or Google Home, Amazon, Alexa, in your house, and you think, oh, that thing might be listening to what I'm saying, or it might be taking a picture or video that I don't want it to take. So we feel this in our own day-to-day lives, right? So we can kind of see how a worker might feel in the workplace in a similar situation. I think it all comes down to me, and I think we talked about this a little bit. Each of us talked a little bit about it. Is the human in the loop situation, right? That there's not, in my experience thus far, any AI where you can take the person out of the loop. And I think especially when we're talking about health and safety, no matter how advanced AI gets and technology gets, there's always going to be a human component to this type of work, right? Because for example, the heat stress monitoring that we're doing, we had when we first started using it, right, an alarm went off for an employee. We had actually the project manager go out to where the employees were working and kind of said, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? The alarm went off. Did you guys get to take a break? And so, that interaction can go one of two ways, right? In that interaction, you can either build trust with AI or you can degrade it right there. Because if the project manager goes out and says, what are you doing? Why are you taking a break? The worker feels like, okay, they're looking at every single thing I'm doing and they're going to scrutinize it and shame and blame me. But in our case, the project manager went out there and said, hey, why'd you guys have to take this? What's going on? I saw that, the alarm went off. And the worker said, well, I didn't know if I was able to take a break. I kind of just kept going because I wasn't sure. And they actually turned it into a positive interaction and a kind of indicator of like, okay, we need to reinforce the work rest schedule requirements and interactions and help people understand what they can and should be doing out in the workplace, and that it's okay to take these breaks and we want them to take action. So it turned into a positive interaction that kind of improved our safety culture rather than sowing mistrust at that kind of human interaction point. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said on that, but I think it's really comes down to that human interface is where you kind of make and break it.
So this is, Tess, this is a perfect opportunity for me to bring you into this.
I might jump in and echo what the other panelists are saying on trust. I think, well, thank you, Richard, for starting with trust as our topic. I think trust often precedes truth in a lot of ways. Prakash, I would nod to you in saying like success stories are really important. And I love that in your presentation, you really started with this misconception that we're all seeing and having. And so rebuilding the narrative of what AI is kind of a must for managers that want to integrate it. Human in the loop was something that came across in all of our presentations. And it just goes to show like humans are never going to disappear. Even right now, like we are the ones that are prompting and then applying the systems. And so we'll remain that way, hopefully. And Angelo, your example is kind of like, that's, a lived experience of afforded feedback and engagement with your employees. I think trust is going to erode if employees perceive AI as replacing humans, human judgment and empathy specifically. And so a way forward, and what we're seeing some of our members do is kind of that transparency communication element. So being really clear with your workforce of like explaining what is the role of this system and what is the limitations of the system actually. And I would hope that like that would be a key focus as well.
Okay, Tess, I really like all of the responses, but Tess, I feel I need a little bit more. So how are workers going to find new ways to assert their rights in this new world of AI?
I feel like tale as old as time. They're going to convene, they're going to organize, and they might be doing that through workers' unions or things like this, advocacy groups. A really great actually resource out in the UK right now is, it's called the Institute for Future of Work. But I think another false narrative around AI is that it's new. I mean, it was coined in the 50s. I think there's a lot of existing regulation that we can turn to. So things like data protection law. In the UK, we have the GDPR. You also have the Equalities Act. I think that was 2010. And I think a big narrative in my space, again, coming from like a responsible AI practitioner background, is AI literacy. So I'm really impressed right now with our workforce on doing the work around this kind of complex, scary topic. I think fear is also sometimes comes from a space of like the unknown. We fear what we don't know. And so I think workers right now, and often supported by their employees and their businesses already, are doing the hard work of, okay, what could this mean? I think especially Prakash did a great job of like translating the technical. You know, I have a lot of brilliant technical friends. They're at the cutting edge, but we don't see enough curious corners where you have like the technical folk talking to the non-technical folk, and then the non-technical folk talking to your comms teams and the public. So I think that might be ways in which workers can be informed, and then informed on like what is the system or the technology itself, informed on what are existing laws, data, because data is the feedstock for AI. And then they're probably going to take like those things and work together in an organized fashion. Yeah, shortly / at this moment as well.
Okay, now I think I'd like to take that further and talk about unions and workers' organizations. But I think the four of us have had 15 minutes of back into chat. I'd like to now to go and to go to the floor effectively and take some questions from the people who are on the session. The first question I've noticed is from Thompson Oluwole, and it's kind of something that I would have asked as well. So it's, how do we prevent AI from becoming viewed as just a policing process rather than something that benefits occupational health and safety management? And I think on this one, Angelo, if you could just give me perhaps a few seconds on this, and then we'll see how that response goes and where we go next.
Yeah, I think it's very depending on what type of technology you're implementing. And I think Tess was right in saying that, you know, it's not necessarily something new, and AI and machine learning and all these terms there's a wide ranging scope of how you can use it. But I think in the sense where you're going to have AI interacting with people or monitoring people, and it is important to have it not be a policing agent. I mean, it's a boring answer, but I think the answer is like communication. You know, we really need to help people understand. There's a lot of confusion about AI, and people see, you know, these movies and like articles that Prakash brought up, and they think that's it, it's over. You know, they're going to bring AI in, and that's the end of it. And it's really not the case. So I think we need better communication around how the tool is being used, what information is being collected, you know, how we're going to protect your data. And, you know, if it's an AI vision thing, hey, you know, faces are blurred out, you know, it's not going to get sent somewhere. Where's the data being stored? So just a better communication on how the technology is being used and how it works. And I also think, you know, it doesn't hurt to do even for management, you know, and for HSE professionals, just doing some your own research and trainings on the side to say, you know, what is AI? How does it work? So that you can kind of help train those employees. It's almost like, you know, it's maybe going to get to a point where it's almost like a new safety training, right? You bring people in the first day and you say, you know, here's confined space, here's fall protection, here's this, and here's the AI vision technology that we're using. Here's what it looks like. Here's where the data goes. And here's, you know, how we feel like it's going to help you. And here's how we use it to our benefit. So yeah, I think it just comes down to communication, transparency.
I think that's a really good response. So Prakash, I'm going to come to you with a different question. And this one's actually from a friend of mine, Kadir Mahmood. How can we balance the use of AI with the need for human judgment and decision-making in safety critical situations?
I think it goes to something we've all been talking about keeping the human in the loop. The AI should be viewed as a tool to help you make the decisions, not make the decision for you, right? So the outputs coming from the AI can be relied upon to have scoured a whole bunch of information and come up with the results from a base set of information to help you and augment your decision-making process. And so we should view it like that. And in the same way that other kind of digitalization has happened in other industries, right? So we look at the way we design buildings, for example. I come from a construction background. We moved away from people doing hand calculations to inputting things into a piece of software, and then it gave people the answer coming out the other end. If people didn't understand what the software was doing or how you could hand calculate this thing and have an intuition or an expectation of what the result might be, then they'd have no idea whether the result coming out the other end was something that's valuable and useful and practical. It's just exactly the same with AI. You still need that human judgment, that the intuition, and have an understanding that the answer coming out from the AI is something that you can use. And if you don't have trust in it, then there should be a recourse for you to go back and go and find out whether this thing is the correct answer or not. And then the whole point of AI is that it's iterative and it learns as well. You have to also treat it as you would treat another human, right? When you're talking to another human, and their opinion, their experiences, their potential biases might give you an answer that doesn't align with what you're saying, and you'd go and do your own research or go and ask a second opinion if you felt a doubt. And we should be doing exactly the same thing with the outputs that are coming out from AI.
I think that's a comprehensive response. Well, I'm going to throw a question in. I should actually be taking questions from the floor, but I've got so many questions. Prakash, I'm going to come to you on this one. How can psychosocial risks be addressed when using algorithmic management in the workplace?
So I think there's a whole bunch of them, right? And there's a potential for the AI to help with psychological risks that happen, in that it could using chat interfaces, and I'm being a bit biased myself here, but they can be used as kind of the front line to engage with workers, to be able to understand sentiment, to see if people are or gauge whether people are likely to be upset or depressed and things like that. And so I think there's that element of. There's also, we can do things in the responses as well. So the responses that the AI gives can be framed in a certain way to ensure that there's inherent positivity in the way that they're responding, to make sure that the way that they respond can be widely understood. One of the things that we're exploring is looking at the responses and trying to aim them at the audience that they're meant for, right? So we work a lot in the construction space. Literacy is obviously a little bit of a concern across the demographic that works in the construction industry. And so if we're outputting answers from AI, which is coming from a set of documentation that was intended to be digested by people with degrees or master's degrees, giving those responses directly to workers who've only got a GCSE or rudimentary education is not going to work, right? So I think all of that also impacts the psychology of how people interact and interpret the things that AI is outputting. So yeah, I think it's got a huge impact, both on the positive side, the stuff I mentioned at the beginning, and then potentially on the negative side in terms of or we need to be mindful of how we respond, or the responses that come out from AI.
Great, thank you very much.
Can I add one thing there? Because it pertains to a question I saw that came up in the chat. I think one of the things too to be worried about with some of this stuff, and you know, AI, but also just technology in general, is the additional load you're putting on the workforce with kind of managing these technologies. And I think, you know, one of the reasons we chose to start to use and pilot this heat stress technology that I've referenced a few times is that it was so easy for workers. They don't even have to turn it on. They put it on their arm and it automatically turns on, and they just forget about it. There's other technologies out there where, you know, they have to turn it on. They got to go on an app. They got to, you know, do the thing, add this, and it becomes another burden for them. And, you know, for people that already have a lot going on, a lot of stress outside of work, inside of work, a lot of tasks to complete. If this becomes one more task that they have to do and manage and stay on top of, else they feel like they're going to get in trouble, right? It adds that another level of stressor kind of onto their day-to-day work. So I think that's an important thing to consider.
If I may also jump in, I think just being really clear on like the key impacts we're currently seeing. Yes, the emotional demands, control on like autonomy and surveillance. but also this kind of conflict and tension that is very like imbued in human AI interaction. And like as like that is a new skill that we all are kind of, no matter what the sector, going to have to work towards, is like, how can I learn to integrate this into already existing processes. Really important, and I think we flagged it a few times, but I want to be really vocal on this, is like having feedback mechanisms and areas of like ability for someone to contest a decision or like afford redress. We've been seeing a lot of work right now on like these kind of town halls, or I call them curious corners. This way, like your employees, not like happening to them, it's happening with them, and you can bring them along on the journey. I guess I would also encourage sometimes that, because there was this huge hype last year where everyone was talking about AI, we had this huge rush to integrate, and it's something that needs to be done gradually and iteratively and in phases with your workers. So you're maybe implementing with like a bit of a test group, get their feedback, action that feedback, and then start to roll out. So just taking it like one step at a time, I think, will also help with the potential psychosocial impacts as well.
Brilliant. Great answers. So we're in the last few minutes of today. We've actually already been 56 minutes. So there's a lot of questions coming up about, is IOSH going to introduce a course in AI and how that will integrate into the OSH workplace. Now, it's being considered, but at the moment, I can't give you an answer. But I will give you an answer in the very, very near future. And if you keep looking at the IOSH website, I'm sure you'll be able to keep up with any updates. I've got a good question for, I think probably the three of you can probably chip in. I'm going to start with maybe, who am I going to start? I'm going to start with Tess. So it's from Senghani. What are the ethical considerations regarding AI surveillance for workforce safety monitoring? I guess the question is a concern around, is AI going to be used effectively to spy on workers?
I mean, I think, and sorry to bang the drum, but again, I think it is dependent on the social and cultural context and how a company is choosing to use a tool. I think hopefully not, right? I think what's really real though is this perception that a tool is being used to kind of quote unquote spy or surveil. And again, that's where we're all kind of on the same team of like, please communicate intentions, because it can be used really appropriately to inform decisions. But I think something we haven't talked to that I would want to point on before we close is like, I think a concern of like worker autonomy or surveillance also sits within over-reliance. And that's something we're seeing more broadly, like what happens if the system isn't used or isn't used appropriately. But I'll pause there and make sure my other panelists can also feed in.
Angelo,
Yeah,
just a quick response from you, please.
Yeah, real quick, I think to Tess's point, it really just kind of, I think a lot of these technologies and implementing AI, some of them do give the ability to kind of increase monitoring of employees. I think at the end of the day, it's going to kind of bring out the either positive or negative kind of safety cultures of the organization that already exist. So I think as you're implementing these, you got to look internally and say, okay, are the conversations around this headed in the right direction, or are the conversations around this headed in a negative direction? And, if you realize that early on enough, you can kind of steer the discussion to say, okay, this isn't about, monitoring and controlling. This is about trying to figure out things that we can work with workers on to improve the work environment, improve safety inside the organization.
Brilliant. Prakash, 30 seconds from you, sir.
Really quick. So look, it's a tool. It's like a hammer in construction. You can use that to make a piece of beautiful furniture, or you can use that to go and hurt somebody, right? And this is what you choose to do with it. And so if, as an organization, you're choosing to use this tool to go and spy on people and monitor people, the problem isn't the tool. The problem is the culture of the people that work in your organization. So you got a bigger problem than the AI, right? You got a problem with the way that people want to enforce rules, or the way that the culture that they expect to be coming to work in.
Fantastic. And I think that's probably a perfect point for us to close. there's nothing I have to say other than to thank Tess, Prakash and Angelo, and to say to those of you who are not members of IOSH, perhaps come and have a look at our website. There will be a recording of this session for you to review afterwards. And yeah, by all means, reach out to us. We're here to help. Thank you all for attending. It's been a spectacularly good attendance today, more than 600 people at some points. So hopefully I will see you on more of these sessions in the future. And again, thank you to our incredible panel.